Thank you, Drew, and good morning, everyone. Very happy to start my day with my favorite NA beverage, which is coffee. And you'll hear me say NA a lot today, and that to me means non-alcoholic. So that is the industry that I am in, and that is the work that I do. And so when I thought about Creative Mornings, it's been a while since I've revisited, and I'm so happy to be back and on the stage. A little different than the red carpet. If you looked into my background, I have done a TED Talk. This feels like a TED Talk, actually. And Creative Mornings across the globe obviously are talking about reflection. And when Drew reached out about 2 weeks ago, I said yes. And it was an easy yes because my life has been filled with reflection. And I would mark that with lack of reflection prior to age 40, where I was in active alcohol misuse, and heavily in reflection and an abundance of it after age 40 and starting my sobriety journey. So we're going to share all of the truth today, and we're going to talk about how using reflection can establish truths about your identity and purpose, like actually pausing to reflect on life. Very valuable. So as I mentioned, around age 40, I had a complete crisis in my life. My alcohol use had accelerated. I was in a corporate environment, and I left that environment to recreate my life. I needed to step away from what I was in and reflect. And this might look like a little bit of an identity crisis, but if you're an entrepreneur, you know this is just the norm, right? This is how we evolve. This is how we reflect and we search for what's next. So starting at the top with Spark Track, this was in 2012. And reflection was a huge part of what I saw missing in the marketing and ad world, and events especially. I would see events being hosted, and then the next day there was nothing about what had just happened. And I personally started to reflect on that and built that into my business. Then I spent about 9 years in that creative writing process about brands. And in 2021, I launched JenGilhoi.com. That is my married name, former name. And I used it as a place to reflect on what I was seeing in the workplace when it came to drinking culture. And it wasn't good. I wrote about it very transparently from my own experiences in corporate because I had experienced that life in marketing. And I translated that into blog posts and LinkedIn where I saw people were really interested and wanted to also change and see this change with me. So 3 years of doing that under the Jen Gilhoi brand. And then in 2022, I co-founded Zero Proof Collective. Not to be confused with Zero Proof Beverage House, which is a great brick and mortar place to get NA beverages, but we are an advocacy group. And I founded it with the idea that there are a lot of barriers in the non-alcoholic industry to overcome in order to move the non-alcoholic movement forward. And so we gather, we're all about advocacy, and over the last 2.5 years, in conversations at events, we've done over 50 events, there's been some hard truths. People are really resistant to accepting a non-alcoholic option at an event. People are really resistant to change when it comes to alcohol in their life. And we've learned a lot through that, and I'll touch a little bit more on that. 2023, I founded Sauna and Sobriety, which is a really great community, and it pairs wellness with the idea that you don't have to drink. I was personally seeking and reflecting on my social experiences as an adult, and they all were centralized around alcohol. So I founded this community to give people a safe space to come and experience an amazing night out without alcohol. Then last month, I did something that I feel is really bold. I created an entirely new made-up last name. It's pronounced Veralle, and it's Italian, and it means all of the truth. My designer of my logo is here in the room, Renita. She helped me craft the soft little butterfly you see under Jen Gilhoi. That's a side profile and emerging, figuring out myself, figuring out, what does this work in this space look like, to what now I feel like is an open-winged butterfly, a little bit of a nod to like stained glass transparency and if you notice, there's a little nod to drinkware in the middle of the imagery. So it's about shattering stigmas around what it looks like to have a social space without alcohol. So I like to tell all of the truth in that. So that's the evolution over the last probably 12 years of really staying in this idea of reflection. In addiction, there was no reflection for me. I moved so fast through my life, I hardly stopped to consider how alcohol was affecting me and my family and my friends. I didn't want to see it. Found this image from a couple years ago from a mirror, just random. I look pretty serious. Taking a look at myself. How is alcohol serving me? What is the truth about this thing in my life? And I could gloss it over. I could tell myself stories. I was a high-functioning alcoholic. I was a great mom. I had a good career. I held a job for 10 years. One of my fellow coworkers is here. Hi, Dorothy. For 10 years without real consequence. So what was the truth about my relationship with alcohol? And eventually, we needed to break up. So these are part of the stories that I wrote on my website to share with others, especially in a corporate environment, what it looks like to have a drinking problem and have to go away. HR didn't know what to do with me. It was a time where it was a very low time. It was a very dark time. And so when I wrote about this baffling breakup, I realized how alcohol was like this friend, this companion, and it was such a painful breakup. I didn't know what I would do without alcohol. I would soon figure it out. The other piece of that is the insanity of the loop of anything that you continue to do that doesn't serve you. So my pauses looked like a hungover morning where I would Google nearest AA meeting in my city. I can't even tell you how many times I did this. Very dark places. And then I would look, oh, there's a meeting less than a mile from here. Like, these things are easy. Like, I should be able to get up the courage to attend, to go, to seek. And I wanted to solve it on my own. I didn't want anyone to know I had an issue. And I also was questioning, how would I ever say what I thought you were supposed to say in an AA room, which is, hi, I'm Jen, I'm an alcoholic. I didn't want to be labeled as an alcoholic. I knew I was more than that. And it kept me out of the rooms for 2 decades, from my 20s through age 40. How sad. I really couldn't do it on my own. Today I have 10 years of sobriety, which I don't know if I've mentioned that. I brought my little chip with me. Thank you. And I really, at this point in my life, was really looking at my identity and my behavior as it began to change at a very deep level with the idea of reflection. And I had to honestly reflect on how alcohol had served me. I thought it served me. It didn't, and it was complicated. So just a little kind of throwback to probably 20 years, and this is glossing it over, but if you've ever looked at some of your albums, I mean, alcohol's there, right? It was always there for me. If others in the picture didn't have alcohol, I certainly did. It always in hand. I didn't know how to do a social experience without it. Couldn't go to a concert without it. Couldn't go to a funeral without, commiserating after. And so this became like the snapshots in the books that I would capture. And there it was. I mean, when I look back now, it's a little sad. But I look back to what I like to call my roaring and raging 20s, where I just moved through life so quickly. I worked at an ad agency actually for a couple of years. And when we all got laid off, it was around the dot-com bust, November 2000, we all immediately went from our office to the bar across the street and spent the rest of the day Friday drinking, commiserating. Oh, what would we do? I was maybe 27 at the time. It was like the end of the world. If anyone in here has not been laid off, I highly suggest it. It builds character. I mean, it builds character that first time, if you recall being laid off, if that's happened to you. Did that job really serve you? Was that really where you were supposed to be? it's okay, maybe not. And so I moved through my 20s. At age 29, I was engaged to be married. Never did I consider keeping my maiden name, which is Pribble. I went right into accepting his name and thinking about infusing my identity with his. And reflecting back now, it is unfortunate that alcohol was so much a part of my life that I brought that into that relationship. So that happened, got married, was working at Pottery Barn for a while, trying to find a new job, which I eventually did. And then by ages 31, I had my first daughter, Ava, or my first child, Ava. She's now 21, a student at the U. And then a couple years later, had my son, Calvin, who's now 19. So having kids accelerated my life. It even caused less of a slowdown. I moved faster in my 30s than I ever had. I call it just the high-functioning 30s. It's like, this cycle. I would work out over my lunch hour, go back to work, maybe do a happy hour, an event, try to parent between all of those gaps, and then also work 40-plus hours. Many of you can probably understand how that could lead to burnout, especially if alcohol use was involved. And by the time I was 40, I had experienced quite a bit of burnout. But prior to that, when I was actually 37 in 2010, my kids were 4 and 6. So this is where, when I'm looking back, this glimmer of creativity popped up in my life. I was getting more sleep, the kids were older. I was like, what could my creative outlet be? So I actually brought these with today just to show how serious I am about reflection. This is 10 years of my life with my kids and my experiences in the Twin Cities. And I would get such a creative high by planning these weekend adventures that I would do with my kids and sort of approaching parenting with a really creative mindset. I was like, let's have fun with this. I loved my childhood. Let's experience it again with my kids. So I decided to frame it around parenting by the vowels. So you see A, activities, E, eats, I, independence, O for outings, U, the unknown, and sometimes YOLO, travel. It also fed my ad brain where I was like, I could create some fun headlines and write some stories. So Life with a Lego Lover became a tribute to my son and all the Legos as a mom that I have stepped on. And Breaking Board actually came from this weird confluence of my obsession with Breaking Bad and the kids' Taekwondo lessons. But the point is, I had fun with it. And I looked forward to that weekly creative outlet. Where would we go in the city? How would I capture photos? So over 10 years of doing this, it taught me so much. And it taught me the power of reflection. After a weekend outing, I would take about 2 to 3 hours to pull together photos, write the story, post it, and share it. So things, might have looked good to any outsider. I mean, I've got this blog going. I'm talking about, my family. Life looks good. In fact, when I decided to leave alcohol, I had people say to me, oh, Jen, you're not an alcoholic. You're fine. So it's confusing. It's a really tough thing to understand if you're not reflecting on it. And I bring this piece up because I found this business card from a company I worked at right after I left a year-long corporate stint that did not serve me, where I was giving out drink tickets, planning company parties, and everything came to a little bit of a halt with that role. I stepped into another role, which was part-time, for Avabar, which was dating, drinks, and deals. Great choice for someone who's really struggling with alcohol. I literally have a glass of buttery Chardonnay on my business card, which was my favorite drink of choice. And my boss named me her Mix-a-Lot. And I remember getting that fresh box of business cards, just all the possibility in that, and going, this is not going to end well. It sure didn't. About 6 months of that lifestyle, so promoting drinking, going to bars, trying to have people download this app so they could find other like-minded drunk people, I don't know. It's a little insane. But it also was, I think, me saying, I can't do this alone. Like, somebody please notice how much help I need. Okay. Has anyone seen Inside Out 2? It's just so creative and so good, isn't it? When I was thinking about what was happening in my brain, like the lack of pause when I was in active addiction, this anxiety character, I was like, that's in my brain. That was in my brain all the time, running the show, controlling this idea of, I'm in emotional pain. I need to cope. I need to solve. How could I solve for this pain? Well, alcohol. Alcohol works. It worked. I thought it served me. And anxiety is, running the show in that situation. Joy at that point was just like a little glimmer in the corner. And what I found is that by pausing and creating more time in my sober journey, I had more time to let that joy in. So for me, it was important and still is to distinguish pause as a quick moment to catch yourself and make a healthier choice. Addicts don't typically have this pause. It's seconds. It's a moment to say, wait, let's interrupt this pattern that's destructive. And reflection works hand in hand with that because it goes deeper into the why and the knowing of a story or a truth. As they say in AA, play the tape. I don't know, the addictive brain, you get in there and you're like, oh, this time it'll be different. It is absolutely insane what you can tell yourself to keep you in that cycle. So using the two of these hand in hand, I would create moments of pause in my sober journey where then I would understand, oh, there's something larger. I can insert gratitude. I can understand. I can allow some joy to come into my life, even in a very dark place. So this next section, I just want to share 5 examples of how reflection has deeply inspired my creativity. Again, why I was so happy to be asked to come today. I was like, this idea of that edamame blog that I did for 10 years, I took that into a corporate environment, and what I noticed was that a 2-day corporate conference, for example, would have no content the day after. Literally, it's the first time you started to engage with an audience and you're off on vacation. You needed to get away after your event. So I would come in and help clients write what I call the morning after. So I would summarize all the learnings from the day, send it to my client, and they could post it and share so that people could engage the next day. They could find a way to belong and take action on what they learned. I mean, how many of us, like even today, like what are you going to take away from this? Can you take some time to pause and reflect? You spent time here. Let's extend that and figure out how can you add value to your life. So that I've been doing that for 10 years. And I love it. It's not my full-time thing, but through SparkTrack, I go to events. I write about it in a very signature way, I believe, that isn't a chronological recap of an event, but it captures the essence of why we gathered. Second example, I did a TED Talk in October of 2022. And after the talk, it was like a 9-month process. And this talk was like a week. So the difference was I had all this time to think about how I wanted to create something. And I really, after that talk and all the adrenaline and all the things I had went through for 9 months, I decided to write about the process of going through that behind the scenes. Not many people had done that when I searched around as I was prepping. So that's out there. It went global in July of 2023, so you can find it on the YouTube channel. Great experience, absolutely exhilarating. Third example is using reflection to kind of overcome frustration and solve challenges. So I'd mentioned with Zero Proof Collective, there was a lot of barriers in the non-alcoholic industry. So I could also be frustrated and angry with them, or I could channel that into deep reflection as to why is there so much resistance to just offer a decent NA option at a sporting venue, at any sort of social space. And so this was a call to say to curators of social spaces, restaurants, bars, the public is now wanting this. There are 34% of us in America now who say we are mindful drinkers. We're just not voicing that always. So this was a call to those venues and those in the systems that control all the decisions to change. This post on LinkedIn, if you are connected with me on LinkedIn, has 25,000 impressions to date, so I know I struck a chord. This piece, the sauna and sobriety piece, hugely close to my heart and my childhood. That's another whole element that I had to kind of set aside for this talk, but obviously reflecting on what you love to do during childhood can really inform your purpose. So what I realized, I wrote an article for the Sauna Times, and it was about reflecting on my childhood and why I love immersing in cold water of 40 degrees or less. Why? And it turns out it's really from my upbringing in southwestern Minnesota, where I would go ice fishing with my dad. And it just was what I called an inherited resilience. So it was a connection to childhood that kind of explained why I'm so passionate about the sauna and cold immersion experience now. It does create a pause physically and mentally. It's a huge benefit. We're working on more data and studies to kind of prove how that can help people in sobriety. So all that to say that reflection through writing has really created some thought leadership and media opportunities. One with Minneapolis St. Paul magazine, which was titled "Sobriety's So Hot Right Now." And another one that followed in February of 2024 was the entire Minnesota sauna community, builders, community people, in the New York Times. It was so great. I noticed that, the Times is very old school. They quoted me as Ms. Gilhoi, age 51. So that was really funny. That is a good one to look at. And lastly, this is a little excerpt from this massive book. This is a 12-day trip to Italy and Spain that I took with my kids. And the point of it was to reflect on my time at the Rome Center in 1993 when I was a student for 4 months in Rome, and bring my kids into that experience. Like, go back there, experience that with them. And also, children, you need to experience study abroad. Part of my reflection drove me to really make this happen while we visited Rome. And as we speak, Ava is just this morning, I don't know, a couple buildings over, who knows where we are on the U of M campus, but she is finalizing her study abroad program for this spring semester. And my son is at UW-Madison and will be studying abroad, so mom win. Also, Shutterfly. If anyone is connected with Shutterfly, I have so many books and so many ideas. I should be a brand ambassador. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping up. Drew's going to come up. I just wanted to pause and ask everyone to think about how reflection has showed up in your life. And are you guilty of moving too fast, like I was in my 20s and 30s? Could reflection actually help you uncover all of your truth? And could it guide you in establishing your identity? Maybe finding your purpose or being more creative? And I'll leave you with this before we head into Q&A. Reflection has been a deep part of my sobriety journey, all helping me to openly reflect on what was happening in my life, giving myself grace, it's huge, letting go, and creating stories filled with truth, even and especially the hard truths. That's where the good stuff is. That's it. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move into some Q&A.
Thank you.